All right, welcome. Like I said, it's nice to see many of you back after joining us for the online national conference a couple of weeks ago. And we were very grateful to our friends at the Classic Learning Test, or CLT, for being the premier sponsors of that event. We've had a great relationship with CLT over the years. And we're excited that you're here with us to learn more about CLT. And we'll get into that in just a minute, but like we open all things here at the Institute and ask you to join me in prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of thy faithful, and enkindle in them the fire of thy love. Send forth thy Spirit, and they shall be created, and thou shalt renew the face of the earth. Let us pray. O God, who by the light of the Holy Spirit instructed the hearts of thy faithful, grant us in the same Spirit to savor what is right and ever to rejoice in his consolation. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Mary, Mother of the Church, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, so I don't think I said that earlier, but for those of you that I don't know, my name is Chris Weir. I'm the Vice President of the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education. And like I said, we're excited to be here with our good friends from the Classic Learning Test, who were our premier sponsors of the National Conference a couple of weeks ago. And I just wanted to open up with a couple of comments, introductory comments, and it really begins with the fact that, unfortunately, in this renewal of Catholic education, which we're so honored to be a part of, there's a misconception that we face quite a bit when we're dealing with schools and educators that come to this vision of education, and that is that all standardized testing is bad. The reality is that the industrialized testing complex today in education is in many ways assessing things that are not aimed at the true nature of education and of the human person. And when we follow those types of assessments, we end up moving farther away from our goal, because due to the fact that they're not aimed in the proper direction and we follow them, we think we're moving forward, and we are moving forward, but we're moving forward in the wrong direction and away from our intended aim with the nature and purpose of things. So a common reaction, and we're blessed to have many more educators, every year realize the problem with that. But the common reaction is to say, let's throw away standardized testing and forms of assessment that look like that. And unfortunately, that's not the right answer, because there is a place for assessment. There's a place for good assessment that is aimed in the proper direction according to the true nature of things. And that's why we are so grateful that the Classic Learning Test found a place in this educational landscape. That's why we're so proud to partner with them as often as we do, and that's why we're so excited for you to learn more about what it is that they do and how it can benefit you and the students and families that you serve. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Brittany and Ashley.
Thank you. And just a real quick background on, I'll let Ashley do a background on herself and then me as well. We are with you. We are both Catholic school educators by trade, if you will. I was at an all-girls Catholic high school here in the DC area prior to coming to CLT. I'm a reading specialist, trained reading specialist. I went to Franciscan University for undergrad and the University of Virginia for grad school. Then Ashley, if you want to give a little background.
Yeah, so I was a high school theology and philosophy teacher for roughly about 10 years at various different, 2 Catholic high schools, one in New Orleans and one in the Washington, D.C. area. I did my bachelor's at Franciscan as well, and then my master's at the John Paul II Institute in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that to just make sure you all know that we are with you and we understand, first of all, how incredibly busy this time of year is for you all. And we really appreciate you taking the time. And that also that I hope you can take this conversation as a peer. That's because that's really what we are. We want the same thing you do. So, it's not letting me scroll. Sorry.
We are not technology trained by trade.
Okay, one moment. Okay, let's see if that worked. There we go. Okay. So, mission really of CLT, oh my goodness, I'm fired, is reconnecting knowledge and virtue. Ashley, was there something you wanted to say about this?
Yeah, I think that in the heart of really what CLT is about, whether you heard the mission at the previous conference or not, if you are or are not familiar, so please bear with us if you know a lot about CLT, is that ultimately we started from a high school guidance counselor who saw that standardized testing in our country is not a neutral thing. I've always been really drawn to the mission of ICLE in the part where you all articulate on your website that modern education is not neutral. It's filled with secularism. It's filled with a particular way of looking at the world and a particular way of looking at the person. And that we as Catholic schools have a very clear understanding of what is the truth first in being a person. And the way that we then view education as well at CLT is very complementary to your mission as schools, that it really is, it's not just about career readiness or job readiness, but it is this intelligence, yes, and an embracing of all that is true, but also all that is good and beautiful, that character plus intelligence is the goal of education. So we're friends.
Yes. So Ashley alluded a little bit to the fact that our founder in 2015-2016 school year, he was working at a very Orthodox, wonderful Catholic high school in the Baltimore area. And that was the year that College Board, and if you're not familiar with the term College Board, that's who runs the SAT and PSAT, the AP exams, a few others, but those are probably the main ones. That was the year that College Board announced that they were going to align the SAT to the Common Core curriculum. So usually when I'm talking to schools, I'll say something like, I'm not here to demonize the Common Core. It definitely serves its purpose in the country. I'm talking to a friendly audience right now. I'm here to demonize the Common Core. So it does move SAT and therefore all curricula in a problematic direction. Why? Because students are told, whether explicitly or implicitly, especially on the East Coast, where it's a very academically competitive area, that the SAT is the most important test that they're ever going to take in their life. So what does that say with what's happening in the classroom? Well, it's telling them that the philosophy that they're learning, even the great literature that they're learning, isn't relevant, because guess what? If its school is truly following the Common Core, they're doing 90% informational text by the time the students are in 12th grade. So that is what is driving curriculum. It is problematic, and the SAT has a large part to do with that. David Coleman, the CEO of the College Board, has stated publicly that teachers will teach toward the test. There is no force on earth strong enough to prevent that. We've all seen that it's true, and in my humble opinion, not necessarily an inherent evil, because there is a test that out there that I would hope that you would want to teach towards in a little bit of a way, and that's us. It's with CLT. Ash, you want to go with that one?
Yeah. I wanted, to piggyback off of what Brittany is saying, being in Catholic high schools myself, which were primarily diocesan, very different from ICLE schools. I think the elephant in the room that we can admit is that ICLE schools, in my opinion, as a former Catholic high school educator, are the creme de la creme of Catholic schools. So you can all, pat yourselves on the back for that. What I mean by that is because you really understand that being a Catholic school, it's not just about the statues in the classroom. As a Catholic educator, when we were asked, how do we increase Catholic identity in our school, we had administration literally saying, we need to ensure that there are statues of Mary in every classroom, and we need to go around and check that the crucifixes are there, because the bishop's coming to check the school. I'm sure you all understand that is like the tiniest little spectrum of what it means to be a Catholic school. It has everything to do with the religion classes. Absolutely. It's first and foremost a relationship with Christ, but it also has everything else to do with what is taught, the rigor in which we teach. And this is why I love what Mark Berlin says from First Things, that important literature, philosophy, politics, and religion get watered down on the ACT and SAT. They are so neutralized of content that they are dull, abstract, and very remote. The ACT and SAT, and by that I would add MAPS, Iowa, really all standardized tests, try to pare this test down to just a skill that doesn't involve any emotional or moral response. And that to me means that it is a very narrow assessment of that test taker. Is that oftentimes, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I meant to say on the last slide that MAPS, for example, which a lot of dioceses use, from the time a kid is in, it's either third or fourth grade, I'm not sure which, they have a projected SAT score on their test, on their MAPS test. So you cannot convince me that that is not extremely problematic, especially when SAT and ACT are driving curriculum in a problematic direction. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Sorry, Ashley.
No, thank you. And I think that's sort of the heart of what Brittany and I are really hoping to share with you today, is that obviously you are schools, that mission is incredibly important to who you are, just as Chris was sharing. But our hope is that we can offer you an assessment to help build and strengthen your curriculum in a way that's actually, it complements your mission. It strengthens your mission. It doesn't have to make you go outside of your mission as a classical Catholic liberal arts school. Actually maintain who you are. And a huge part of that is our CLT author bank. This is one of the things that makes us incredibly different from any other standardized test, is really the authors that we have. One of our colleagues that just joined the company spoke from his own experience that as a teacher himself at a private secular school, it was even in that environment looking at the author list of saying, wow, if that's what's on this test, that's very, very different from anything we've seen. So I just simply put some of our names there that we have. The list is quite extensive, but this is what makes the difference between instructional text, very boring text, versus text that actually, when you get the analytics back on that as an administrator, can help you identify as a classical school, wow, these are our honest strengths, these are our honest weaknesses as a school or within this particular class. And that's a really powerful tool in the hands of teachers.
Definitely. So we talked a little bit about the difference of the CLT and the our competitors, if you will. So SAT. When they made their change into the 2015-2016 school year, they also said they were taking out any aptitude on the SAT. I remember being in high school being told by my high school guidance counselors, like, well, like, you can kind of study for the SAT, kind of, but like at the end of the day, it's really like a measure of your intelligence. That's no longer the case. I had several students who I taught at the school here in the DC area who there were a couple times where I would see their SAT score and I was like, how the heck did you get that? Sweet girls, but just not always the most academically motivated. Well, it turns out that they had parents who hired these SAT tutors for them that in this area make roughly 10 grand per kid. It's insane. And that's how they were able to just get this inflated score. Not measuring their aptitude, mind you. They learned how to trick the test. That's 100% what it was. So that one of the main differences with CLT and then the SAT and ACT for that matter, is that CLT, we don't align with any kind of test prep companies. We don't want to contribute to that, where there really is not much fairness at the end of the day. Ashley talked about the author bank that has to do with the reading passages, obviously. We are definitely more rigorous, as is your school, than the public school down the street. When you get a standardized test percentile from Iowa, for example, actually that's kind of a bad example because Iowa's only private schools, but MAPS, they're doing the percentile based on the schools in your area. You know you're better than the public school down the street. And CLT, we only really work with rigorous often faith-based schools. So they're gonna, you might get a slightly lower percentile, but that's a good thing because it's gonna show you where you can grow and learn. We were all about giving, pats on the back in other areas of life, but standardized tests is not one of them. Ashwin,
So
take it over.
yeah, I think one thing that is helpful to always keep in mind is, in some sense, I want to take you now through the nitty-gritty of what CLT actually offers. The biggest thing I can never say enough of is that we're a suite of assessments. So while we may have talked a lot about SAT, ACT, please know that we assess from grades 7 through 12. So if you're coming from a K through 8 school, we're very much applicable and there to help you. All of our tests are complete in 2 hours long. So this is something that we really pride ourselves on. If any of you have ever proctored, I will speak to the PSAT. This was like the worst day in the fall for me. The only good part of it was the guidance counselors had like coffee, in the break room. But other than that, since I taught upperclassmen, I was losing a whole day of instruction with them when they're already out and about all the time because of just everything that happens, especially the senior year. And then on top of that, I'm in a classroom stuck with sophomores for like 6 hours at a time for something that we know they're really probably not, many of them, going to be national merit scholars to begin with. No offense to the children, but it's just the reality. So one of the things that's amazing about CLT, it's 2 hours start to finish for the kids. All of the tests are computer based. If a school wants to do paper option, we have paper option, but due to the fact that we're computer-based, there's a lot of great things that come with that. It's next day scores and analytics. You're not waiting weeks down the road, getting the analytics once, winter break or Christmas break has set in, or once you're in summer break, and then trying to get your faculty back together. It's something that within, a week, once we can walk you through the analytics, or if you're a pro at it, like some of our people here are. Chris is a pro at reading analytics now, right, Chris? That's something that you can just boom right away, take that back to your faculty and start addressing what you saw in the test. The great news to this too is that no matter what happens with COVID, we want you guys to be in school, but we understand that might not be the case. The test can be taken whether the students are in home, whether it's hybrid or in school, because it's computer based. So we have our CLT 8. This can be used as an end of grade metric for rising 7th and 8th graders. Our CLT 10, this is comparable to the PSAT. This actually comes with the top performers can be eligible to receive a $2,500 scholarship, which is, it's amazing. And what I mean by that is I had a school that they started off with the CLT 10, and to see we've actually given a scholarship to someone to one of our partner colleges. That's a big deal that you can do that at that age. And then obviously our CLT, which is the college entrance exam. So I just want to really clarify on that. And in closing for this, yes, we're college entrance, absolutely. But I think we want to try to shift that understanding that CLT really is a rigorous test produces rigorous analytics, so that it's used for curriculum building throughout your school.
Yes, well said. So this is just, we'll just go through this quickly because we do a large part of what we wanted to talk about today were the analytics, which we have a special guest to tell you all about her firsthand experience. So basically the format is actually kind of similar to an SAT, and those are the 3 sections. Again, the test takes roughly 2 hours to complete, so it is shorter than the SAT or ACT, and versus Iowa Maps, whatever, it's not destroying an entire week of your instruction. It is one day, one and done. Again, it's only 2 hours, so it's not like you can't have instruction the rest of the day. I often, when I'm talking to high schools, I'm like, you've had assemblies that last 2 hours, and they all admit they have. Why not allow your students to be put in front of beautiful content and possibly get a scholarship from it? Why not? Okay. Ashley, you want to talk about this and
Yeah. So what I'll do is I want to just walk everyone through analytics of what you concretely get as an administrator. And then Ms. Cruz, maybe if you want to speak after to your experience.
And also Michael Van Hecky does want to speak as well.
Beautiful. Well, yes. Thank you. So these are actually, I asked permission from Michael Van Hecke. These are the data from his school, St. Augustine's, last CLT. And I took CLT 10, excuse me, screenshots for a particular purpose, and I'll explain why. So this is what an administrator would receive on your dashboard, as you can see over on your left. So let me just move my little talk box out of the way here. So what you can see is right away, this is showing what pops up as their CLT. It was the the most recent test that students from St. Augustine took. What you see at the top there, what it's comparing is how great they did, students of St. Augustine, compared to the national average of the SAT. So what I'll do now, next slide, is I'm going to walk you through. This is, if we were to click on their CLT 10, the first thing that an administrator will see is always try to think its first big picture, and then it whittles itself down to more finer details. Every time a school takes the CLT, any of the tests, you can see that we're tracking for them their overall score. So we go all the way back to 2018 with St. Augustine's. You see that they've maybe taken the CLT 10 multiple times during the year. And then we get to see their performance by subject. So we see a rise and a fall of how are they doing overall each test on these three major areas. If we click to our next slide, this will give you a breakdown even more. So obviously there's a lot of detail here, and I didn't want to take too much time, but just to show you that at the top here, we get our average score comparison. So look at how on this last CLT 10 that was taken by St. Augustine's, they outperformed by over 20 points right there, the national average. And that's the national average compared to the PSAT. So the CLT 10 is norm referenced up against the PSAT. So we see that they're kicking butt and they're taking names. And in some sense, that's what we expect from all of your schools, that you can kick it to the public schools that you're doing an amazing job. I'll talk a little bit though, the difference of what user norm affects. We then see just simply the average score by subject. We want to always see that's even. And then the next thing we see is examples of what your top kinds of questions, areas of improvement. What you see blacked out there are how many students didn't answer a question, because that can affect your data that might come back. And one thing I want to say is that passage details, where was it? So you'll see it right here. Thanks. No. This one's good, Brittany. There are certain things in the data that a school gets back that show you the difference in a CLT test. And those are those aptitude-based things. So if you see, for example, passage relationships, it's at the very bottom of verbal reasoning. Passage relationship covers analogies, it covers metaphors. So that's that aptitude kind of thinking. We see on mathematical reasoning at the bottom of quantitative, logic, and word problems. So what I want to present is that you're seeing data here that will be at that grade level. Our test creators ensure that the passages are at grade level reading. Though I will say I think they do tend to be a lot more challenging because they're not informational text on vacuum cleaner manuals. They're reading Frederick Douglass and having to compare and contrast that to Thomas Aquinas. That's just different. But we ensure they're capable of it. So you're going to see that, but then you're also going to see that aptitude reasoning. So these are the areas in which many schools, that may just have to be a moment of, if we didn't do so well on algebra or geometry, maybe that's because we just need to go back and cover that content, or this is a real area of weakness that we're seeing with this particular class. Then lastly, Brittany, if you click to our next slide, I want to take you through, this is what's really cool. So it doesn't quite look like this. I meshed two things together, but this is an example of, let's say, a student named Billy, okay? Every student receives their own analytics that parents can see. And I think what's really cool is if you're at a smaller school where you have that time, it can become a great thing at the beginning of the year, to have conversations with your student. I'm a huge advocate for testing in the fall and testing in the spring, meaning fall testing gives us a baseline that can help the teachers on the ground come up with clear plans of improvement for their students, specifically all of individual students in their class, as well as the class as a whole. And spring testing gives us summative testing. What actually happened with our plan of improvement? How is our class, student, and school continuing to grow academically? So let me just take you through something really quick about the CLT-10 that's helpful. You'll see if you look at score, Brittany, maybe you can like circle that for me so everyone can follow you.
No.
So,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, I can see that you're moving your mouse.
Oh, you can. Here you go.
So if we see, student Billy, for example, received a 93 on the CLT-10, we see that puts him in the 87th percentile. So what this means is 93 is a phenomenal score on a CLT-10. Standard scores are around the mid to upper 60s to the mid 70s. That would be a pretty standard score. And 93 is a very good score. This is a strong student. But what you'll notice is that Billy is in the 87th percentile. You'll see that highlighted 87. And what that's saying is Billy is in the 87th percentile of other CLT-10 test takers from that year. So what that means is this is where you get better data on how are you doing compared to other schools like you who are taking any of the CLT tests. I didn't put it on here, but for the CLT-10, for example, you get to see the concordance of how a 93 would have matched up to a PSAT. And then we also have our concordance chart on our website that shows you how we match up to SAT and ACT. But that's really important because as I've talked to different administrators, sometimes it can be difficult for them to see, oh my gosh, our student got a 65 and they're in like the 40th percentile. That's the 40th percentile compared to other CLT test takers, which is going to be a more challenging percentile. And then I'll just quickly take you through the rest is that, Billy here would get to see his total score, what he got on each section. Then the really cool part here, the percentile report that they get to see of a breakdown. So it's a little bit more detail. And then Brittany, maybe if you just go on next to the next slide super quick. Again, just like you get to see for the class as a whole a breakdown, student also gets to see, I only opened up one of these in this screenshot, how they did on each, subject domain. And then for example, practice questions, they, as well as you, get to see example questions of what a student might have missed. And I think our next slide, can you take me to that one, please? Okay, great. Go back. Awesome. And then I think what we can do is pass that on to our speakers here who want to share about their experience with analytics.
So maybe if we can start with, Mrs. Cruz.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Good morning. I am Cyril Cruz, the principal of Holy Innocents School here in Long Beach, California. It's so nice to see Mr. Van Hecke's scores because my experience with the CLT is very new. We are going into our third year of being a Catholic classical liberal arts school. So we decided, hey, why not try the CLT? So our scholars, this is the most beautiful test ever, but it is so challenging for our students. Our data, our kids did not do very well on this test. Does that mean we're going to stop taking it? No, it doesn't. But it's really great for our teachers. I know our 8th grade teacher, so we take the CLT 8, so our 7th and 8th grade students took that test. And Sister Benedicta Marie, she looked at the data and said, oh, yeah, I see why they didn't do so hot right there because I didn't cover that, I think it's a great way to really look at our data to form our curriculum. Authentic assessment is truly beautiful, especially if our goal, right, is the formation of these souls for heaven, right? And just by reading these beautiful passages and challenging passages. I know some of the kids, one of our graduating 8th graders, we went over his scores with him and he was like, what? And he was so excited. And in comparison to what we do take here in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, the STAR test, it is really different. It is very different, and I think as we move forward with the CLT, and in really bringing into our school this beautiful curriculum, I think it's going to help us form even our literature choices. It'll help our teachers like really look at the art of the question, right? How are we questioning students during class, looking at our different methodologies. So we're excited. And I'm pretty sure our scores are gonna be looking like St. Augustine's pretty soon. So I'm gonna give you a run for your money, Mr. Van Hecke.
Thanks a lot, Mrs. Cruz. That's excellent.
Thank you.
I think it's also important to note what Mrs. Cruz did mention. Holy Innocents, the student population that it serves, has never been a very high test scoring school. That's just the nature of the reality here. But like she said, I think it's a really great way of assessing where the students are at. So with that, let's turn it over to Michael Van Hecke, who is the president of the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education, but has also been leading St. Augustine Academy in Ventura, California for a few decades now. So Mike, are you ready? Oh, maybe I need to unmute Mike. Hang on, I apologize. There we go. Is that better, Mike?
I don't know sign language, so
there we go. Very good. Sorry about that.
Not a worry. Yeah, I would echo what Cyril said. When we first took the test, I was a little disappointed. And I think last year was the first year we really did everybody on our tests. Prior to that, it was pretty much just those that wanted to take it took it. So we had little data to go on. But the first thing I found early on was how poorly we did, and I was upset. I thought, I don't like that test. Then a couple things happened. We started to expand it a little more. I started to find out about what it really was a little more. I took the test on one of my airline flights, and it was challenging and beautiful. That's what sold me. And then we had the good fortune to go through analytics. We had about an hour-long meeting to dive into the test scores and find out what they were. And it came to me at that point, I think we take these tests, everybody knows we take tests, then we have to publish them all to show everybody how well we're doing, how much better we are than the guy down the road. And I thought that's really backwards. If we think about tests in a sense like, well, if we think about education like we think about our spiritual life, it's very private. And the better we get at our spiritual life, the harder we are on ourselves. We need a spiritual director to really talk to look into us, to help call us to a higher purpose, a higher being, and better act. So I likened that to this test, and I thought, what if I were to take these tests and we just use them as a faculty to really honestly look at our kids, honestly look at how we were doing through an assessment that is consistent philosophically with what we're trying to do. We might still find there's one place where we're at the 30th percentile or something. And then we get to talk about it and we say, well, we really think over 25 years of talking about this and thinking about it, we think that should come the following semester. So we're not going to change our program just to bring our score up. We're satisfied with that lower grade on the CLT 8. Okay. But more importantly, we take the test, we look into them, we look at the analytics, and we find out that those more important, more human elements that we're really trying to form in the kids, like the logic, are much higher than just that sort of spitfire data that they're collecting as they're learning things through an education. That's important, but more important is, are we teaching them how to think? And then lastly, I would say it was also very informative to see those the coordination, or what did you, I can't remember what you called them, Brittany, but the comparison between, say, the SATs and the CLTs, it made that 78% all of a sudden bump up to 93. I thought, oh, that makes a lot more sense. So anyway, I would say it was a really important tool for us to start to learn for our school. We're very excited about the coming years, about it being a great aid to us becoming better as a school and serving the kids better. And then think carefully about trying to think more in terms of internal data rather than external. We're great.
Great.
Seems pharisaical, you know. I'm holy.
That's right. If I could just add one thing too, I think there's one area, especially for the schools that we serve. One of the first questions that a lot of schools receive when they're initiating a renewal in Catholic liberal arts education, parents want to see what do you mean? What's the difference? How does it look different? I think there's a huge marketing opportunity for schools that are using the CLT to say, well, here's what the Archdiocese requires, or here's what your local public school, here's the test they would take on an annual basis, and here's what we take. And just parents, I mean, you saw the list of authors earlier, but just parents to look at the two and see the passages and how, like Mark Bauerlein was saying in that quote that Ashley read earlier, how dull and lifeless that these passages are, and then to look at the CLT. And like Mike said, his own experience taking it, yes, challenging, but so beautiful and life-giving. So I think there's a huge marketing opportunity there too for those of you that have that on your mind. So.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you to all of you for sharing your experience. That's couldn't have said it better myself. Love it. So just a couple more things here. So there are some scholarships to some great Catholic universities tied with the CLT. So we have over 200 partner colleges that accept CLT test scores as a standalone alternative to the SAT and ACT that we know of. We go to some of like the bigger secular education conferences, and we would have admissions counselors come up to our booth and say, well, we're accepting the CLT now. We're like, oh, really? Thought maybe you want to tell us that? So that we know of, especially now with COVID, we didn't stop. We had our April test, we had our June test. Students were able to take the CLT from the comfort of their homes. It was remote proctored. They had to have a camera and microphone. Keystrokes were recorded, their screen share was recorded and everything. So that all the test security, we were just able to do it remotely, which was great. So a lot of colleges, I say that because a lot of colleges that wouldn't normally accept us are having to give us a second look right now because SAT and ACT are probably going to be canceled, at least in several parts of the country, through the end of the year. So, I mean, seniors need a test for a lot of these schools. And even if they say their test optional, they still require tests for scholarships. So CLT is able to step in and meet that need right now. University of Dallas, for example, I don't mean to single them out and give them a shout out. They're great. Not as good as Franciscan. I'm just kidding. They actually offer, for example, an extremely generous scholarship. You can go to our website and read what that is. I don't want to give it away, but it is exclusively for CLT test takers, because they just know that students who are taking the CLT are coming from rigorous background, and if they're able to do well in the CLT, holy smokes, they're the student that they want. So Ashley, do you want to read that quote from the school admin?
Yeah, absolutely. So this just came in from a school administrator to one of our coworkers, and I wanted to include that so you can see really the life-changing aspect of the scholarships that the universities are willing to offer exclusively to CLT test takers. So they wrote, a former student of mine got a 40% reduction in tuition at Christendom because of his CLT score. The family wants to make t-shirts with his CLT grade on it, since it saved them about $50,000. There were tears of joy involved, life-changing stuff. I do think that when we sort of start to see a lot of the schools that maybe you might send your students to, they tend to be a lot of our partner colleges. So I would really encourage you to, doing the CLT 10 and the CLT when the scholarships are involved, it's really extending that offer and that opportunity to students. And I think here in our next slide, Brittany, I think we just have one last quote we can read before we open it up to questions. And I'll let you, Brittany, read because I know Bishop Mashabuff is a high school you work with.
Yes, Bishop Mashabuff is a wonderful school in the Archdiocese of Denver. Deacon Mark Nestork was the principal there. They just hired a new one, but Deacon Mark was who brought CLT to Mashabuff High School. So he said, "We have found a gem. The CLT provides us with the assessment data we need through a Catholic worldview. Assessment cannot be the sole focus, but aid us in forming our students. The CLT allows us to do just that. The testing time is minimal, the logistics are seamless, the content is aligned to our curriculum as a Catholic school. I am thrilled to have partnered with CLT to provide a tool to help us in our formation of future saints." I think that's it. Okay. Oh, Ashley, you're on mute.
You know, when people do that in the Zooms, you're like, how do they keep talking when they're muted? Well, I see, but I just did it. So I think, Chris, what we can do now is let everyone ask some of the more concrete questions that we have that Brittany and I can answer for you.
Sure. So I will unmute everyone. If you want to stay muted, go ahead and mute yourself. But you should have access now to ask any questions you like. Feel free to speak. I think the crowd is a doable size that we can just speak up if you want. I don't think we need to use the chat box. We can keep it live. So any questions? Now's your chance. Usually we just have to wait through a little bit of awkward silence and then it opens up.
It's the same like the classroom.
I have a question.
There we go. Hi, Marie.
Hi. So this would be, I would think, a very good tool to use for professional development. Would you say? We're just starting our third year. So I would think the feedback from a test such as this would be really good for my faculty to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to finally see you, Marie, after our chat. There you are. This is me. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would also just speak from my own personal experience. So I taught in the humanities. I taught theology and philosophy in the school. Oftentimes, I can give my own assessments, but as great as a teacher I might like to think that I am, I wasn't able to come up with an assessment in which I could distill their reading comprehension skills, their writing skills, their grammatical skills, so that, and by the time they get to me, it's like I'm not able to work holistically together with the other departments, right? To say, it seems as if this entire junior class has extreme deficits when it comes to these specific areas. Does that make sense? So that becomes, I think, a time in which the data can be given, and I don't say this just because I work for CLT, but I would have loved if we would have done this and not, in my opinion, what were oftentimes nebulous faculty meetings, but to really be able to see, so this is what we're working with. So now I can go back with my department and we can come up with a game plan of, hey, you guys wanted to do Socratic seminars a lot. Well, that's great. But let's look at the class that we have and what areas might that we might be at a deficit in trying to do that, right? Like if they can't understand analogies and I'm trying to get them to think at a higher level with a very challenging text, we might need to go back and work on just some basic skills here so that they can do that.
Yeah, one thing I'll add on to that is that testing companies as a whole they appeal to the masses. Makes sense. That's, there's millions of students out there. They're made to appeal to the masses. That's not what we are. We are niche. We are for you and your very specific curriculum. We have schools that reach out to us and sometimes we just say to them like this, I don't know that this would be a good fit for you. It's not always a comfortable conversation to have, or they're welcome to try it if they want to, but ICLE schools, it is something that you all are different, you are special, and CLT was basically written for schools like yours. So I say that because as far as professional development goes and really going into the analytics, the SAT scores, for example, the score sheets, they're not really telling you anything. They're telling you what you already know. You're better than the public school down the street. Cool. So there's that's kind of why we're here, and we hope we can be of service to that.
Right.
Okay, so we have some questions in the chat box now.
Well, while you take a look at that, Brittany, I would also say, you know, Marie, your question makes me think of Mike's, the anecdote that Mike shared about that 30 percentile, you know, area. And the fact that the faculty gathered around, analyzed that data, and then came to the conclusion that we just think for our curriculum, we're placing that subject matter later, and so we're okay with it. I mean, that conversation and analysis alone is, you know, hugely valuable professional development. So that pertains as well. So yeah, how about those questions in the chat, Brittany?
Yep. So Karen was asking about like comparative data for the CLT-8, and that is an excellent question. We did a whole comprehensive look at the CLT-10 a year ago with some statisticians from Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland. We are currently working on that with the CLT-8. So to answer your question, not yet, but we are getting there. I will also say that we do have several schools that, and I know this is kind of an annoying answer, but I'm going to say it anyway, that a lot of times their diocese, archdiocese that they're located in, they require MAP, whatever, Iowa. They'll also opt to do CLT-8 for 7th and 8th graders. It's 2 hours out of your entire school year that is actually going to tell you something. So just throwing that out there, that's something that if that's something that you chose to do, you would certainly not be alone there.
Yeah, I would highlight that's the situation we're in at Holy Innocents. As Cyril mentioned earlier, we're still required by the Archdiocese of Los Angeles to take the Iowa test, right? Or STAR test. So we still take that because we're mandated to. But the CLT is more of an internal decision, kind of like Mike was talking about earlier, that it's for us and our benefit here, and that's why we've decided to use it, and not so much, you know, for the external reasons. So still hugely valuable.
Yeah, thank you. We got a question from
Dominic. Were you trying to raise your hand? Oh no, sorry. Oh my gosh, I just returned back to my teaching ways. Yes, Dominic, what do you want to say? Sorry. Go ahead, Brittany.
Okay, so Dominic asked in the chat, if the classical high school my student attends does not yet offer the CLT, what school is that? And we'll reach out to them gladly. Can individual parents secure it for their child? Yes, the answer is yes. We offer, so you can, for the CLT-8, CLT-10, parents can proctor at home. For the CLT, for college entrance, we do the remote proctoring. So as long as you have reliable internet, a student can take it individually. But yeah, if you have, parents are sometimes have the strongest influence to the schools. So just saying.
And then Karen, to your question about getting CLT-8 as an entrance exam, yeah, the answer to that is yes. There is a push to do that. Some dioceses may use that now. I was just able to speak to an administrator where they typically did this as a diocese, but due to COVID, they can't take the entrance exam. So they're trying to look into adopting the CLT-8 as an entrance exam. I definitely think what does help is having administrators at certain schools that you're all at, depending on what your interaction with your superintendents looks like, is also advocating for that by saying, you know, in some sense, yes, you may let us do our own thing, but sometimes I think they need that help from their colleagues as well, who have that, you know, let's just be honest, richer understanding of education, Catholic understanding at best, to, you know, they need the experience, right? Someone saying, we've had the experience with this and it's worked for us. Everyone, a witness is much more powerful, you know, than simply us calling the superintendents, right? So that's definitely a very powerful thing to witness to.
Definitely.
Okay, any other questions? It's your last chance.
Oh, wait.
Just make a comment. We are recording this, so if anybody needs somebody else, like a school board member or assistant principal or something, to see this, just contact Chris or Brittany or Ashley, and we can figure out a way to get that to them so that they can get this really comprehensive presentation of what the CLT is and what it can do for your school.
Thank you. And one real quick thing, we didn't give you any kind of action items, kind of important. If you, we are going to be reaching out to all of you after this is over. But if you want to get the ball rolling like today, just let us know. And we're happy to get you set up. A lot of decisions are being made for the upcoming school year for obvious reasons. So we are happy to help. We would love to get you set up.
And how do they do that, Brittany? You guys want to type your emails into the chat, or
yeah,
what's the best
we'll
way?
we have everybody's email addresses, so we'll reach out to you right after this. Just reply to that email, and we'll get the ball rolling.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our friends at CLT again for your support and sponsorship of the conference, and this is a great way to follow up with that. And we look forward to our partnership moving forward. And as Mike said, it is being recorded and it will be featured prominently on our website, hopefully by the end of the week. So those of you that attended, if you want to send anybody back there, you can. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. God bless
Thank
you all.
you.
Thank you, everyone.